Is there anything that you don't want to talk about?
I mean, not really. I mean, if something comes up, I'll just I won't say anything. I'll just leave the room and slam the door, and that's how you'll know.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to Please Hang Out With Me, I'm Going Nuts, a show about constraints. I'm your host, Channing Kennedy. With me, as always, is my co-host, a baby. How did you get a rubber band ball out of that drawer, my man? Tessa Brunton is our guest today. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much. What are you doing? Tessa is I think of you as a cartoonist. Is that still your byline?
Yes, a cartoonist and haver of many fantasy projects.
I have some rubber bands here. You already have enough rubber bands, so I'm going to put these here. I'm going to close that up. You and I met... I don't know how you and I met.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met you because you were wearing really cool glasses. It was at Ape, and you came by where I was tabling, and we talked about comics for a minute.
This is the Alternative Press Expo, which was a thriving fest for a long time, and then underwent some troubles, and is...
And I don't even know what form it's in now. I know that there was, like it moved to San Jose, but... Yeah, it was held at the Concourse in San Francisco, and that's where I met, a lot of the people that I'm now friends with who make comics, including you and Emily, and fellow creative people.
I think, the couple of years that it was at the Concourse, at this giant venue, I feel like it did so much to sort of blur the lines between super indie DIY folks and, big, comics people who are really trying to do glossy stuff. I think actually you're right. I feel like a lot of folks that I met at that show are folks that I still know. I saw them a second time because every zine fest is essentially just an excuse to hang out with people after you have been locked in a tiny room for a year.
It's like a really long house party if everyone has to sit at a table the whole time. For the duration of the house party.
It's a big house party for introverts.
Yes, exactly.
Where everyone has a project that they're just waiting for you to come by so they can talk about how bad it is and how they don't deserve to be here.
Yeah, and this moment of horror when they watch you read it in front of them, or you watch other people read your work. Those shows are people who are making stuff for the joy of making it, They're not going to get, usually, a ton of money or, it's not it's people labor of loving together and stuff.
Which is an interesting way to put it, because you and I were just talking before we started recording about how often it's not a labor of love, it's a painful compulsion that you have to feed.
Yeah, I know. It's so strange because I feel like it gets wrapped up in all this other stuff. There's the exciting, giddy, creative part, and then it gets tangled up in these other parts of trying to have an adult life and takes on these other layers and then becomes more tortured. Compulsion makes being creative sound like an addiction, which is a very negative way to characterize making things.
Right.
Especially because making things doesn't have to be it's just interesting how it transforms so that the impulse starts to feel negative, like something you're doing that is going to be painful, but you have to do anyways. Yeah.
You know what I think? This is just me talking, having a new thought. I think that the addictive relationship, as it's classically understood within addiction psychology, is actually with not making things. Because I think... You can see if this sounds true. For me, I feel like I have this part of my identity that's tied up in making stuff. And when I start to feel fucked up is when I try to not do that. Yeah. Is when I try to resist it. And then I tell myself my life would be so much easier if I would just give up on these dumb aspirations of being an artist. When I'm clearly I'm almost 40 years old and et cetera, et cetera.
I think the tortured part is there's a lot of saying tortured is very vague, and there are a lot of different ways that you can be tortured about being creative.
Sure.
But the idea of it being tied into identity, I feel like is, in particular for me, one of the reasons why it's tortured is because like, if you have self-esteem issues or, like, something like that, and you're like, oh, here's this thing that I feel good about, and I'm going to make this thing to give myself some, I don't know, like, it, you know, to, like, generate good sense of self stuff, then you being able to successfully make something, like, becomes, like, important in order for you to feel good about yourself as a person. So, like, then I had this boyfriend who wanted to be a writer and is a writer, but, like, his moods, like, were, like, pretty dramatic and varied, like, day to day based on how he felt his writing went. And it was sort of exhausting because it was like he couldn't just, like, have his creative work be this thing that was, like, going on in the background and wasn't, like, this, like, if it went horribly, then, like, his life was horrible, and if it went well, then his life was going great. And I think part of that was, like, tied into his sense that, like, he had to really make it as a writer in order to, like, be, like, a worthwhile person or to, like, validate the choices that he'd made. And then also I think it gets tricky as you get older because there's this idea that, like, people age out of being creative.
Right.
There's, like, a period of your life where you're allowed to experiment, and then after a certain age you should either have, like, totally figured it out or you should have given up and moved on to, like, more adult, like, things. And that can be really, like, difficult to wrestle with if you're like, but I still want to make things. Like, yeah. So,
well, I mean, it's also, like, not true, which is why it's so convenient a way to fuck yourself up.
Yeah, I know.
Is by just telling yourself this very convenient lie that capitalism will back up. That'll tell you, like, if you aren't making any money off of this, then why is it worth anything?
Right, totally. And, yeah, or even if you're still, like, experimenting with technique.
I have to put a hat on. Hang on a second. Do you want me to put this hat on?
Mission accomplished.
Your Uncle Jesse got me this hat. Ooh. One constraint that you have dealt with for a long time that you've been very open about is with chronic illness. That you are trying to, like, earn money and pay rent and deal with everything else that all of us in the Bay Area have to deal with, and be a creative person who has this outlet where you actually put your energy into, because that's what you need to do in order to feel like your full self. And you have this other full-time job, which is not just managing your health, but which is also researching your health.
Yeah, all you say is true. This chronic illness thing, I've been sick for 10 years, and it's a really confusing, like, time-consuming, like, incredibly boring and yet super important job. Like, where if you don't do it, like, you have these horrible... If you're not, like, constantly focused on treatment and trying to find ways to feel better, you feel, you know, like, fear that you are throwing away, like, your chance to get better. But, like, what you wind up doing then is, like, pouring all of your time and energy into, like, following these bizarre, like, internet rabbit holes where, like, some doctor in, like, Minnesota has developed a treatment that, like, might help, and you have to, like, buy all this stuff, or you have to spend, like, 6 weeks implementing this, like, special diet plan, and yeah, so that's definitely been, like, a huge part of why I have and have not made stuff over the past number of years.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, how your symptoms manifest?
Yeah. So,
what is it that you're dealing with?
Yeah, so I was originally diagnosed. Well, I wasn't diagnosed for the first 5 years because, like, well, I was diagnosed with a number of things for the first 5 years, but none of them I think were accurate. And then I was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is commonly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, which has, if anyone has ever looked it up online, like, an insane list of symptoms. Like, people who have been diagnosed with that have all kinds of things that I don't have. And that's one of the reasons why people are really confused by it, is because people don't know if it's the same thing, and even if it is, like, what is going on? Why do these people, like, feel cold all the time and these people feel hot all the time? For me, it's like having the flu all the time. I describe it as, like, bad days, which can be pretty standard, are like having like the worst day of the flu. And then good days are like the last day of the flu where you kind of feel better, but like you're not 100%, you're still kind of like weak. Yeah, so it's basically when you say fatigue, like people think about when they're tired, but it's not like that fatigue.
Right.
It's like, so that's sort of, yeah, you're just in bed all the time.
And it's a condition that gets used as a punchline in different places.
Yeah, it's very misunderstood.
Yeah, it's something where doctors might or might not take you seriously, and you might have to go visit a few doctors before you find someone who will listen to you.
Oh my god. I had a year where I saw this doctor. This is a whole story that I won't go into, but I was on his waiting list for a long time, and he was a very established UCSF immunologist who, like, researched a lot, and he basically was like, oh, this is all psychosomatic. I think that your response is based in trauma that you experienced, that this is all... And I totally was like, well, I don't know what else it could be, and so I spent a year trying to, like... Anyways, yeah, so it's, people don't understand it. It's the medical establishment kind of treated it with a shrug for a really long time.
Right.
And that has resulted in a lot of people who are very sick not getting help.
Yeah.
So that's that.
And that's on top of, and you've dealt with some really, like, profound trauma in your life that you've also had to overcome.
Right. And one of the reasons why I believe that doctor is because I had been working on that trauma and, like, coming to understand how much it had influenced my life and impacted different parts of my, like, how I exist in the world. So I was like, well, I don't know. That was a really messed up thing. Maybe my body's responding to it in this, totally insane way that's super disabling.
Right.
But yeah. But he was wrong.
Yeah. When I was a teenager, my mom's boyfriend, who lived with us for 7 years, I think, had some undiagnosed illness that got, like, worse over the course of time that we knew him, and that he lived with us, and went to a bunch of different doctors, people who were or were not in our like, insurance network. One doctor eventually got there's two parts of the story. One is that he thought he had all kinds of different things until it finally got diagnosed as hepatitis C.
Wow.
From a blood transfusion that he got after a car accident in the 1970s.
Wow.
Now, complicating that story is the fact that one of his doctors was eventually arrested for allowing people for writing bogus prescriptions for money under the table.
Oh, wow.
My mom's boyfriend himself was arrested for forging his own painkiller prescriptions and selling them to his friends, and he was an alcoholic and an abusive piece of shit. So his journey to wellness was complicated by non-medical factors. So even as you're trying to... Oh my gosh. There's no way to isolate your health from the rest of your life.
Right, yeah. And also, like, I feel like if you come from a background where you're like, the medical establishment is looking out for me, these people have my best interest, like, at heart, and they're really smart and they know a lot. Like, I'm gonna, if this person tells me that this is likely, sort of, like, cloaked in the authority of that world, like, I'll be like, I will consider it. And I definitely, since then, have become much more skeptical of doctors, which, like, scares me because I also am really skeptical of people who are skeptical of doctors.
Yeah.
Like, people who are like, do you want me to...
You got it. We're good.
People who... Oh, it was so shiny.
Nope.
Like, people who are like, oh, doctors don't know anything. I have these supplements here for $50 a bottle that
Right.
like you really need to try.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something you've written about, because you have a blog that you might still update about.
I'm planning on it at some
Yeah.
point. I need to.
That sounded like a burn. I wasn't trying to phrase it like a burn.
I've been meaning to, but every time I'm like, I don't want to write about my health. Like,
But you wrote about trying to research mold, and
yes.
that not only are there real complicating factors, like the fact that the insurance industry has done a bunch to hamstring mold research,
Which
but
is
there-
bananas, P.S. It
Right.
sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's not.
yeah. Though anyone who's been following the news lately will realize that the corruption that we're seeing now has actually been around for quite some time. But it's complicated by the fact that every bulletin board is populated by folks who will tell you that the medical establishment, that because you can't trust this, that means you can't trust anything about Western medicine.
Yeah,
and I'm guessing that there's probably a big crossover between folks who post on these message boards and people who say that vaccines cause autism, for example.
Yeah, there's like a very strong cross-pollination between those communities of people who are just like, we can't trust the government because like these things were wrong, so like it's all a lie. And also, I mean, like, the thing is the message boards are so complicated because it's not just like people who are basically going rogue and being like, don't go to doctors at all, like doctors will lie to you, or I wrote this book based on this thing that I think I found while I was in the mountains this one time that like sort of worked for me, and like now you should try this. But also like everyone is really desperate, and like really, not everyone, but like a lot of people are like, I mean, the whole mold thing, for a little background, is that the idea is that people who have chronic illnesses, it can be worsened or caused by mold exposure, and we're exposed to mold all the time, but that certain molds, especially building molds, can really like mess you up. And actually, I'm really excited because the CDC just updated their guidelines about myalgic encephalomyelitis like this week or recently.
Oh, wow.
To say that mold is like they don't know how it impacts stuff, but
right, but they're saying that it's effective.
Yeah, but anyways, so these people are like sick and they're reading that mold might be making them sick, and they're like, I have to leave my house and like my whole family needs to come with me. Like I'm buying a trailer.
Right.
And like, it's just like, it's dire. So yeah, it's a hard world to to dip your toe in.
Yeah, and medicine, like Western medicine, has a lot of like real problems. Like if you're fat, if you are a person of color, especially if you're black, if you're a black woman, then medicine is not going to take you seriously in the first place, on average.
Yeah, well, and also the whole connection too of just women's like women having a higher rate of like immune disorders,
right? And
that being often written off.
Hold this baby, by the way.
I would love to.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. Hello.
You good? You good?
Oh, he's like the shelf of knickknacks. Hey. Oh, hi.
Hi, baby.
Oh.
Hi, baby.
But yes, immune disorders and various things like that being written off as stress or emotional issues, as happened with me at one point.
You did like a 8-panel comic, maybe like, it's been a little while, it's been like 7 years or so.
It was a while ago.
That just hit me really hard, that I like changed the way that I thought about stuff. That was talking about being sick and wanting to present a positive face to your friends and not be a downer, and maybe if you would just like do positive thinking, you could convince yourself that it's not such a bad deal. And you said recently that like this is going to be a longer comic, but it basically ends with you saying like, there is no good resolution to this problem. And the image is you tearing all the skin off of your body because you hate your body so much. And I, at the time, was having some really uncomfortable conversations with someone that I am no longer tight bros with about bravery in comics and storytelling, because his ideal of bravery was Robert Crumb, who is a much beloved comic artist in some circles, has been doing stuff for decades, but all of his brave work is about how him bravely speaking about women that he would like to rape.
Yeah.
And we can leave that there.
Yeah.
When I saw your comic, I actually said, like, oh shit, this is what actual bravery looks like. Because you talked about something that was honest and potentially disqualifying in various areas. Like, if you wanted to present a brave face, you wouldn't make this comic and put it up on the internet. You would just keep this tiny little secret to yourself. But to just come out and say, like, my shit might not get better, and it sucks. And that's how it is.
Right, and it's like, the whole thing, too, is it was like, it continues to suck, and it's not going to, like, I don't know how this situation will continue without me having this feeling, and I don't know how to keep having this feeling. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how life works if you feel like this a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Which is funny, because I didn't have a lot of friends who were also, I didn't know anyone, actually, who was, like, also sick. Everyone I knew was, like, on message boards, in terms of other ill people. And I actually just got in touch with someone who's also ill, and she was like, oh, you totally seem really together. How do you cope with the fact that, like, you feel like the worst version of yourself when you're sick, because you get so angry and so, like, bitter about stuff? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I wish I had an answer for you about how to, like, I mean, meditate is what people tell you to do, but it's
right.
Yeah, it's a problem when you want to, like, not have the feelings you're feeling about your predicament. And you're like, if I want to survive this situation, I need to, like, figure out a way to not feel this way about this situation. Mm-hmm. Oh! Hey! Hi!
Tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing now. Oh, my sweet boy. Oops.
So, I, like, during the long fallow years where I wasn't really making anything, because I was just kind of, like, doing my work from home job to earn money, and then I was, like, being sick the rest of the time, I came up with, like, a million comic ideas that I was not working on, which is also one way to go slowly crazy, is to have a lot of project ideas and then never, like, do them, but then have a lot of time to think about them. So I had all these ideas, and the thing I think I wanted to focus on most, though, was, like, autobio comics about being sick, in part because I feel like the version of life that I was experiencing in terms of, like, what was happening with my chronic illness was, like, not one that I had really seen anywhere else. And then also just catharsis, like, comics as therapy, a way of being, like, I don't know how to say it, because it's like, I feel like it sounds like I really just want to complain about this, which is probably true. I think I do want to complain about it a little bit, but also it's like the need to express the, like, rage and confusion, and then also to, because I feel like it's one of those things where, like, you don't know till you know. I tried to make comics about the whole story because it's so complicated. It's such a complicated journey that I was like, I can't just, like, make little comics. Should I?
No.
I can't just, like, drop in and be like, this thing happened. But I think I was too ambitious in wanting to tell the whole story, so now I'm just trying to make shorter comics that are about, just, like, emotional moments. It's more about coping with the illness than about the actual plot of being sick.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this one way that you've been able to go back to the theme of the show, to work within the constraints that you got?
Only because I have help now. Which is, I live with someone now who, like, is helping more financially.
Mm-hmm.
So I have more time that I can make stuff in.
Right.
So, like, it's not something that I could do when I was on my own, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could do it when I was sick and I was living at my parents' house because my mom helped me with so much when I was living there.
Right.
But a lot of it is tied into having help. So it works within that constraint. It's still difficult because I'm like, even though I'm trying treatments now that are helping more, the illness is very isolating, and making comics is very isolating. So there's a lot of isolation. And I've often thought about how if I was, like, creative in a way that was more social, I would probably be a happier person.
Baby. So let's end it there.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching. Please hang out with me. I'm going nuts. Our guest has been Tessa Brunton. Find her on the web at tessabrunton.net.
TessaBrunton.com.
Oh, moving up.
I know.
TessaBrunton.com. I especially recommend her long-form comic Passage, one of my absolute favorites. And you can find a paper copy of it. You should snatch it up. Please Hang Out With Me, I'm Going Nuts is a production of artworkpractice.llc. Please find us on the web at artworkpractice.com. Thanks as always to my co-host, A Baby. I love you, baby.
Good job, Sydney.
And will you hold this kid so I can go stop recording?
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
little muffin. Oh, hi. Oh.
Oh, keep singing.
Okay. La 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 la.